What's going on, folks? Welcome back to another episode of Bev Boys, your one-stop shop for all your energy drink reviews and performance talks. I'm Christian,
I'm Brian.
and we are the Bev Boys. Today, we got a few good topics for you, as always. Banger, solo dolo episode, just the two of us. But first, let's get it started with some drinks. Brian's got an interesting one that we've kind of been looking forward to. I have one that I know will piss him off, but I actually haven't tried this flavor of this brand, so I'll go ahead and start it off. I got an Alani Nu, playing into the predatory marketing that we talked about in the last episode. I didn't pay for this. I will say that these are provided. I actually get these for free at work, which is kind of fucking sick. Not going to complain about the brand if they're free, but got an Alani Nu. This is the cherry twist flavor. I've never had this one. I've had, if you remember one of our very first episodes, we reviewed the cherry slush and it did not get very good reviews, especially from Brian. I think I've also since kind of cooled off. I was a pretty big Alani fan at some point. I thought a few of their flavors were pretty good. And now I don't really. I think I had that Christmas flavor that was pretty trash back in December, and since then haven't really messed with it. But cherry twist, we'll see if it's actually cherry twist or if it's just androgynous sweet fruit flavor. But Brian, what do you got?
I do want to clarify this saying. I used to like Alani Nu as well because I did like the peach rings flavor.
That's right.
Way back in the day with the OG kind of like white can. Mm-hmm. But I have one that's been a hot topic everywhere but nowhere, all over the internet, on every single thing, and that is going to be the Kirkland Sparkling Energy. We're looking at 70 cents per can. This could be unreal, my guy. Just as a quick deal here, we have 1 carb, 10 calories, every B vitamin you can think of, 200 milligrams of caffeine, and that's it.
Really simple formula.
It's gonna be a Celsius type of competitor, so we'll see if it does that. This is the tropical flavor. It looks very much like a Costco Kirkland brand kind of deal here.
Yeah, always interesting when store brands make their own version of something. Usually it's pretty similar, but I don't know about an energy drink. I'm usually kind of like an off-brand type of guy when it comes to that kind of stuff, like a great value versus whatever other brand. But we'll see if it holds true to an energy drink as well. So should we pop top?
I was gonna say 3, 2, 1. Ooh, I got a little vapor.
I got a little gas too. Oh, this smells like a cherry limeade type deal. This might actually be decent if they did a good job. Kind of like a pinkish flavor.
Mine was like a tropical punch. That's not bad.
Not bad?
That's really not bad. Like that's, I'll put it this way. If for 70 cents a can, you could rip that.
Is it more mango, more pineapple, orange?
It's like pineapple, papaya, like a little bit of mango. It is a punch, but it's only tropical fruits, which is sick.
Okay.
There's no coconut, which is great. I feel like that's a big deal, and like unfortunately has to be emphasized is that there's no coconut.
Yeah, we're not a huge fan of coconut on this channel. This guy is definitely just a cherry limeade.
It's not terrible though.
It is not terrible. I will say, I actually just had a rain cherry limeade a few days ago, and that smacks. I would say out of all the cherry lime, it's definitely not as good as like a Rain or a Ghost cherry limeade, but I would say that it is.
It's solid.
I think for their flavors, especially, it's a little bit. I almost want to say it's a little bit lighter, which for them is like kind of
Kind
weird.
of weird.
They're usually just like sweet, 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 super sweet. Um, Not terrible, not terrible. Yeah, I remember. I think really the like you said, the peach rings one is no longer made. The orange like dream is really the only one that I would say like I still kind of like. It's kind of like their spinoff of like an orange cream. This one isn't
Yeah.
horrible. It's not bad. It's like a lesser version. The cherry limeade is a good flavor in general. It's tough to do it poorly. I would say it's not the best cherry limeade that I've had, but not bad.
I feel like a cherry limeade's like a pizza. Like even when it's bad, you're like, it's still pretty good. So it's
Yeah,
really
it's
like
tough to have a
it's
bad
a steak
pizza.
flavor.
Yep, it's tough to have like bad pizza or bad ice cream.
Which I I know I don't want to get us sidetracked immediately, but I think we're gonna get sidetracked immediately. What is Alani's flavorings? Because I like if we look at this right now, we have the tropical, the peach, and they have a orange flavor for this Kirkland, which not huge on peach, definitely not an orange guy, but I think like that's a solid, safe flavors like to get started with from Kirkland.
Hmm.
They do, but Alani does have like they have a peach flavor, pink slushy, orange kiss. Like a lot of these flavors just look like way too much. Like it
Oh
feels like they
boy,
cover up so much. A
they
sherbet
got the
swirl.
old they got the old ambassador program on the website.
Yep.
Oh
Yep.
wow, every single picture on here is a girl. I
It
would say the
is.
age range is probably 18 to 24.
Yes.
Very very
Very
specific
specific
target
prototype.
market. Wow, Brad, you were fucking kidding. Yeah, this is
I mean, I you might call me an asshole,
okay.
but you can't call me wrong.
Okay, here we go. Here we go. The perks. The perks. Monthly product. Okay, free shit.
Okay.
I think it's pretty standard if you're an ambassador. Exclusive merch. I can't imagine that Alani has good drip, but okay. Unique events and competitions. Close Alani community. Alani credit codes. Job opportunities. If I hit apply now, wonder if I
What
could
if
get
we get
accepted.
it?
I think we'd be the first of our kind, if you know what I mean.
It would also just be even funnier as people who are super like outspoken about, oh,
Yeah,
cotton
it'd be
candy
funny as
flavored
hell.
energy drink.
It doesn't
Bad
even like
vibe.
usually it gives you like these are our ambassadors. You know how like Ghost has like all right these
Yeah.
people, this is what they do, a little bio about them. It's just like some stock photos of like chicks holding Alani, and that's like these could be pulled from like just some random person's Instagram for all we know.
Yeah.
Oh,
I'm look
recipes.
I'm looking through the flavors of their energy drinks and just every one of them sounds like just the most it's almost like it's targeted towards like 13-year-old girls.
Yeah. Let's look at okay, let's go through all the flavors here. We
Cotton
got
candy.
ass, probably. Strawberry
Like
sunrise. It's like a
sunrise.
strawberry orange. That sounds like it could be decent. I'm assuming it's probably very sweet.
Sherbet swirl sounds disgusting.
I'm kind of out on the sherbet flavors. Sorry, Nick. Um,
Sun kissed mix.
uh, okay, it's pink
Okay.
slush. I've had the
Cherry.
pink slush. That one's like a very arbitrary sweet.
Oh, I think that's just like a
Watermelon wave.
that's like a 3-pack, I think.
Yeah, it looks like okay. Hawaiian shaved ice. I'm not a fan. Orange kiss. I do like the dream float. That's like the orange cream type
Okay.
deal.
Watermelon wave.
Watermelon wave. Haven't tried that one. Hawaiian shaved ice.
Ew.
That's cherry twist. That's what I'm drinking right now. Cherry slush, the OG one that we shit on. That you shit on. Juicy peach. Yeah, the juicy peach is not the same as the peach rings. Um, Cosmic Stardust. I remember that was like an OG flavor. Another kind of
Which is also
androgynous one. Breezeberry,
Breezeberry,
Blue Slush, Cherry
cherry
Bomb.
bomb.
That actually sounds kind of good. I'd be interested to try that one. Lime Slush. I'd be interested to try that one as well.
Why are they so into slushies?
I don't know. All right, I gotta get off this website.
Yeah,
I'm losing testosterone.
bad vibe. I didn't mean to derail us, but I mean just sad.
Yeah, sometimes you just gotta look into it. You gotta expose them.
Now, I will say, the more I'm drinking this, the more I'm like getting after it.
Mm.
I'm a pretty big fan of the at least the tropical. I would do a 24 pack of these. I haven't had the peach, haven't had the orange, but like so far, I I I thought this would be my favorite going into that pack, and it by far is.
What are the other flavors in that pack? I'm assuming it's like a 3 flavor pack type
Yeah,
deal.
so it's tropical, it's peach, and it's orange.
Okay.
I don't know how I'll feel about the orange. Like, is it like sparkling orange juice or is it like an orange soda? We'll find out.
Hmm.
And then peach. Peach is a tough flavor because it's gonna be great or it's gonna be terrible. It's not really like one of those and like not everybody loves peach. So
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of peach either. The orange could be good, dude. We were ripping the orange grill of mine, the orange rush, back in
I
AZ.
really don't think
Those the Yeah, the boys were ripping those for a while.
those
They
you
were
can
good.
do, and that's why I think like if you do it more like an orange soda, it's approachable. Whereas if you do it like a sparkling orange juice or something, that's where it gets like,
Probably trash.
yeah, Celsius does their orange like that, and it's terrible.
No, you gotta. That's gonna be like it's gotta be like how the Rise does the Sunny D, where it's like a light carbonation,
Yeah,
and obviously they're like partnering with Sunny D, so they know the flavor is gonna be spot on.
but
It's
you
tough
got
to
to go
do
with that
outside though.
route. Yeah, that's why I think you almost have to like you can't always use the same carbonation. You have to like manipulate that a little bit, which Rise
Yeah.
does a really good job, and so does Bum.
Hmm.
I do wish that my one not really a gripe, but I think it is my perfect 10, but it would be even better if the Ghost iced tea lemonade was uncarbonated. As someone who loves carbonation, I think that drink would be so good uncarbonated, or just offer a non-carbonated version of it.
Hmm. Dude, I haven't had one of those in a while. I actually saw one at Walmart. I didn't pick it up for whatever reason. I think they've been kind of like coming back a little bit. Maybe
Yeah,
it's just I don't know. Maybe like not the hype hasn't worn off. Like they're still it's still a really good drink.
I think they
It's just
have
like
the back stock like flowing out now because our Circle
yeah,
K like by us has it. And so I'm just in there every day pulling because they
yeah.
have them for $1 right now. So I was just like pulling them off the
Oh
shelf
wow.
every day. And I'm like, you guys don't know what monster you created.
Yeah.
But we have a couple of good topics of actual topics to talk about today. One of
We
them,
do.
I kind of got the. I was having a couple good conversations, and it really brought up the idea of like survivorship bias within coaching. Um, and within like the realm of survivorship bias, there's a couple of ways you can approach it. One of the ways I would say is like when you kind of put things into your program and people make it through, and you really look at the winners of that block versus the losers. It didn't work for how many people, or it didn't make any significant difference across the board, but you have one or two people that it kind of worked, and now you rely on that, or to the same extent, things like you overlook some of your programming. We kind of get into, oh well, we didn't have XYZ, in our off season. Maybe we went too many stacked days, but we got away with it. Instead of looking at that and going, like, we kind of rode the razor's edge and we got lucky. You go, well, that's something that we can just continue to do and push the needle on. You know, when you kind of think of that, especially like where you're at now, where where do you see like the biggest plot holes, or like how to prevent those types of conversations, even internally to yourself? Like, how do you prevent those from occurring?
It's a good question, and I think it's it's a little bit easier, I think, in a sense with me now because I'm working with a lot different like population within the same org. Like before these last 2 years, I was working with like 17, 18, 19 year olds, really young guys, versus now like we still have like some young guys on our AAA roster. Don't get me wrong, but then we also have like older guys who are like older than me, who are like they have some guys that are like in their 30s. So like I think one, it's to your point, like it could be really dangerous. Like if I took the things that we were able to do with those really young guys, they're really raw, they're super adaptable, like they have little to no injury history. There's just younger people, they have more energy, and kind of just apply like blindly applied that to a 32-year-old veteran. Yeah, that would probably come back to like
Haunt
probably
you.
probably come back to bite me in the ass. So I think it's a little bit easier because that's almost it's a little more obvious. Like okay, like maybe it isn't as obvious as some people. So this could be like a good lesson. Like your training is probably going to look different at different stages of your life, especially like for an athlete that's their job. Um, so I think that's one thing that you have to take into context if you're thinking about like, oh, like this is my goal for this program. I did this and it worked really well. I think you have to take a step back and like look at what the context was in that situation. Like, okay, is this the same type of athlete? Is it the same, time of year? Is it the same constraints? This and that. I do think this is what makes it tough is like you do see success with something that, maybe was like a little more extreme where you're kind of flying a little bit closer to the sun, and like it feels good. It's like, oh, I feel like I got the most out of like that program or that training block. But it's also, you can go too far the other way. You don't want to overcorrect and just be super super cautious all the time and never kind of push boundaries, because then you're probably never getting the most out of your athletes. So obviously I think like injuries and like if things are like flaring up like within your program, whether it's on the field, with like soft tissue stuff, or in like the weight room, if you have a lot of people like with like low backs barking, stuff like that, I think those are like easy context clues that most coaches probably already look at. um, I think listening to athlete feedback is kind of like an underrated thing. I think a lot of times, and maybe this is just me, like just because the position I'm in now is like so much different than the like positions I've been in the past. I think like getting athlete feedback on like what the program is doing to them, like how they're feeling on it. I think that's important. Those are the main ones that kind of come to my mind now. Obviously, you have to look on like on field performance too. Like if you're like if you're always like ripping PRs in the weight room and on the field, but like the on field performance is stagnant or declining, that's obviously not a good thing. Uh, might make you feel good because obviously like you want to see progress like in your domain, but you also can't lose the forest for the trees and lose the fact that the end goal is to make them better at the actual sport. That's kind of where my head goes to begin with.
I guess like how dangerous do you think survivorship bias is as a coach?
I think it can be pretty dangerous. Like, for example, if you're, you know, married to a certain method or type of programming that says, like, okay, this is kind of like what we hang our hat on within this department, or what I hang my hat on as a coach. You get your kind of ego caught up in it. And because, you run this really like a rigorous program, and you see some really good results with a few guys, and they kind of stand out and excel, but the majority of people either don't make progress, or it could even like set them back. I think that's really tough, because then you end up blindly applying one lens to everybody, when obviously people are going to respond differently to different things at some point. I also think it can hurt you in terms of like you being able to rethink like your own opinions and like views on things. Like if you just like, because then you're kind of just looking, it can kind of play into like a confirmation bias almost, I think, too. Because okay, this works. Like I want to continue to like believe that what I'm doing is good, and like I'm not like completely fucking this up. So you're probably looking for those few people that are like responding well, or like doing well with your program. And that's our like confirmation bias, kind of like fits in with the survivorship bias. And then you never grow, you never rethink if what you're doing is the best way that you could be doing it. Um, that's where I think it can be really dangerous. That's where I think, obviously, like I said, like athlete feedback, like looking at the actual numbers, like are the results there? Are the results there for just a few guys, or are the results there? What's like your, you know, ideally you're doing like some pre, during, post test within your training, whatever metrics you see fit. Are those metrics trending up over time, or are at least the ones that, you're focusing on trending up over time, and the other ones that maybe you're putting on the back burner, or at least are staying stable or not detraining? And then I think kind of like what we do, and we know is like a good thing to do, is like stress tests against like other coaches, like just talking to other coaches, making sure that you're not like missing something. Or like we talked about in the last episode, you could use AI and actually have it kind of like stress test your ideas. So that's my take on it. I want to hear your take on it. This is your question.
You made a couple really good points that I kind of float around in the same idea with, and it's number one. I think it can be super dangerous with your training for you and your athletes, just in the sense of, if we have this like big survivorship bias of like, well, we made it through, we don't have to change that, we can ride that again. It's like you'll inherently probably dial it up a little bit more than what you did unless something happens. So at
Mm-hmm.
what point do you dial it up so much that you have something catastrophic? You know, because maybe you just had a truly unique situation where it was still too high and you just kind of scraped through. Um, the other thing would be like you just become very ignorant to the holes in the program, in the holes in your programming, in maybe it's scheduling, whatever it may be. You become very ignorant to those things, and instead of looking at them as possible areas to improve, to get better, you then kind of go, well, those are good, let's move on to something else. And now you're chasing rabbits that just may not be a concern. It's the same effect of, what we always complain about the athletes that are like, oh, I got to go to my PT, or I want to do like hydrotherapy. And it's like, well, you sleep like shit for 4 hours a night and you eat like shit and you don't drink water. So let's try and take care of those first. It's the same situation as if, you're going to try and like do all this extra stuff, when in reality our schedule for training is terrible and we're not doing the right things. We have 3 high days back to back, and then we kind of go into this kind of off period. So for me, I think like it's one of those things, that's for sure. And then when you kind of look at it from a development standpoint, I think number one, you can stunt the growth of the athlete. Number two, the growth of you as a coach, because you're not like you had mentioned, like you're not hitting that kind of think again. piece to it, to where you're reevaluating and like challenging your own beliefs, because you're going to go, well, that worked. So you're not really, most people who do that aren't going to go back and look at it and go, I don't really think that worked as well as it should have. They're going to go, well, we made it through. Because a lot of
Mm-hmm.
coaches are going to be in this kind of like fight or flight kind of panic state of, holy shit, like, we're probably maybe not as good as we want to be, whatever it is. You're just always into the next thing, that they're not going to take the time to do it. Whereas if something were to go wrong, then he would have had that panic. Um, Roundabout way, just as saying, like, I 100% agree. And it's just, I think it's a dangerous game to be played. And it takes an individual that is self-aware to like not get into that hole, or have other people and good staff members around them to be like, hey, like, I get that work, but like, you need to relook at that. Like, someone has to call you out.
Mm-hmm. I also think there's value. This might be like a little bit counterintuitive, but I also think there's value, like specifically, like we're looking at like the quote unquote survivors from, whatever it may be. I think it's also worth looking deeper into those people and like why did
Why did
these
they
people
survive?
exactly? Because I think there's definitely some nuggets of knowledge in there too, and kind of like not not just saying like, oh, like these are the people that are like they're good enough to handle this type of training. Like look into that and why, and you can probably learn something about like how different stressors like impact different athletes, and you can kind of hopefully learn something from there.
I 100% agree. Like, they'll leave cues on how to overcome it in the future. I think understanding, like, you should also look at both sides of the bell curve of why didn't so and so, kind of survive this block.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it be that the numbers went down or they got injured, you should look at that. And I would say consider all factors too, of like the survivorship bias. Like, if you're going into this, did they not survive because they are going into the training program again with bad sleep? They're drinking every night. They're doing this, that, and they're not taking care of themselves, or is this they're doing everything right, and then all of a sudden they still can't survive? But we have somebody who is doing the same exact thing and surviving. Now we start to look at, well, what was slightly different? Position, type, this, that, or the other. I think those are the requisites that you kind of like look for and see where you can kind of leave clues to yourself on what really did work and what was it absolutely never going to work in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. I think there's definitely like there's a reason people study like the best of the best and whatever it comes to like their sport or like whether it be business or something like that. It's because like there's a saying like success leaves clues. Doesn't
Hmm.
mean that we need to like blindly apply those clues to everyone else and just expect it to work. But I do think it's interesting. You could probably figure out some cool stuff from those quote unquote survivors.
Absolutely. Should we kind of
Going
move to,
off that,
yeah.
yeah, going off that, what so you talked about survivorship bias and like effective or efficacious coaching. I guess that kind of led me to the question of what is effective or efficacious coaching? Like what does that mean to you? What does that look like? Does it look different throughout like at different points of an athlete's career? Does it look different depending on, the sport, time of year, this and that? I think you could go to a lot of different ways with that question. Probably going to look a little bit different for every coach, to be honest with you.
I think so. um I'll say this when I kind of put it into my situation. Like, efficacious coaching, I think, has to be athlete first, in the sense, right? Like, we have our systems, we have our programming, but putting their best interest in mind and doing what's right for them, even if that means that's an uncomfortable conversation with them, if it's the best thing for them, I think that's the right thing to do. That's where truly efficacious coaching will come through, versus hey, we're going to do it my way. This is the way we're only going to do it because that's how I believe my system works. And it becomes more about the coach and their ego getting in the way than, again, putting the athlete first in the situation of, hey, I don't really like what we're doing, but they respond really well to that. And that would be in the sense of, maybe you want to get into less true strength oriented things and to more dynamic effort or into more traditional quote unquote power or like speed strength exercises, but they just hyper respond to strength work. The efficacious coach, in my opinion, would, if that's what we're going to nickname it, they're going to go, well, they respond super well to the strength work, so I'm just going to keep going on that. Right, I'm gonna bleed that one until it dries, and we'll touch it on the other stuff to improve it. But we're gonna move the needle as much as possible, even though it's not what I want to do. Um, and I think with that too, it's understanding that, like, you're gonna have things that you don't love to do, but it's probably the best situation for the athlete. We look at it from like a track and field perspective, and it's like, well, do you want to drag this tent a mile from the parking lot over there so you can set it up for the track meet? And you want to be there 2.5 hours early so they have enough time to relax, get settled, then warm up. No, you don't want to spend the extra 2.5 hours and lug this around, but is that the best thing for them? Probably, because you're going to be able to put the best performance when they're A, not sitting in the sun too long, B, they can kind of take a breath and relax as soon as they get there instead of having to drop their bag and immediately warm up. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you're gonna do those small things that puts the athlete first and then the coach second. Like, whether or not we want to admit it, like, as a sports performance coach, we're support staff. And then even as a in my role of being like an event coach, which would be the same role as like an assistant coach on a team sport team, whether you're a pitching coach, whatever it is, you're putting the athlete first because you want the best performance from them. Yeah, it helps you, but at the same time, you're not like, hey, fit yourself into whatever mold it is. There's things that's outside of your control. Um, so I would say, like, if I was to start that conversation, I think it starts there. Then from there, you're doing things. We talk about like the barbell method, or like a Pareto principle, where 80% of what we do is going to yield most of our results, and that 20%, that's where we kind of test and play around with things, and that's where you want to be efficacious in what are you applying in that 80%. The traditional tried and true methods where development will happen, that this will move the needle, even if it's not the like magic pill leaps and bounds gains, but it's going to incrementally push you in the right direction. And then you experiment with that 10 to 20% that's going to possibly be the magic pill, quote unquote. I think that's where, like, in the more programming side, I think that's where the efficacious coaching is, versus just kind of saying, like, we're always going to do this. And this is like my identity as a coach of I'm an X guy, or just being like, this is what needs to happen because it's athlete first. Do the stuff that will work, then do the experimentations. I don't know.
No, you hit the nail on the head there. Like, it always has to be athlete centered. The two things that come to my mind are just like honest communication, and then I think a big thing that I've been trying to focus on is like, ideally, like, at the end of the day, like, they just have like a love of training. Obviously, we're not going to get there with everybody, and some people, like, it's just like I get it. Like, some people just see that as like something like they have to do as part of their job. If they wanted to just train, they'd probably just be a strength coach, like like me. So I think, but I think that through good interactions and like holding a standard, but also giving the athlete some autonomy, I think you can get there a little bit. Like you mentioned, like, it's so interesting because I think, or at least the perceived view I have of, like, let's take like football S&C, for example, like, very like structured, very like disciplined. And maybe that's just like a survivorship bias type of thing. And it's also just like the culture of the sport too, right? Like it's a little every that's a cool thing about every sport. Like they all have kind of like unique different cultures. They have different views towards training in general. Um, but to me, like the effective coaching is one, you obviously need to do your job. Ideally, you do your job well and have a good relationship with your athletes, and they eventually come to enjoy training and like being in the weight room. And I think that's where it kind of plays into that like 80-20 or that 90-10. Like that 80% of stuff is like your big rock stuff that's your, kind of your non-negotiables. But if you get those non-negotiables, then you can kind of let that 20% of like, oh, like this exercise may not, necessarily move the needle a whole lot, but like they like doing it. I think that's worth it versus being like, it's worth it. And I think people are a little bit like scared of that because it looks unstructured. It looks like you don't have a plan. When in reality, I feel like
It's
if you
even
look
more.
at it, yeah, and like if you look at it through the lens of like strength coaches compared to like other people like in athletics, I think strength coaches usually have like some of the better like thought out, well planned in advance plans as opposed to like other people. That's just kind of my opinion. It doesn't always have to be like super regimented. I think it's kind of just like ingrained in you. I feel like when you come up, like everything is like very detail oriented, which I think is great. I think attention to detail is important, but it can be a little bit robotic at times if like that's all like, I don't know. I kind of get both sides. I kind of get both sides, so it's tough.
I don't think you can. I feel like the coach. We've seen the people on like Instagram where they'll come through and say, I don't have any plans because I just want to train them to be more robust. So, it's like the vast overcorrection. We'll always see the dogmatic of it. So the way far ends of the spectrum. The I'll never have a plan guy versus the every minute of the entire session is structured. And
Yeah,
of course, like we always get to like the answer lies somewhere in the middle. That's where the truth is.
right.
It's like you should have like a good plan to like progress and make these changes and then be able to just have that like at least ideas. And
Hmm.
in that point, that's where it's like you have that like free training maybe in the warm up where you're doing XYZ or games or your energy system development or change of direction day. It's more small sided games. It's maybe your tempos is non-conventional linear running and it's something else to where you want to get an intensity that is sub-maximal but be creative with how the volume occurs and that's fine. And I think that's where like you said, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there of hitting that like 20%, the 10 to 20% of just experimenting and seeing what works. And it's like that can change week to week. If the volume is a progression, you can change your implementation of how that occurs each week. And I don't think that it's a problem. I don't think
Hmm.
that that's going to be an extremely new stimulus, especially if your athletes are used to it. Which I think the more variety in training, the more robust the athlete's going to become, and the less likely that it's going to be problematic when they encounter something new. They're sponges, and I
Yeah,
think we got to treat them like that.
yeah. You can't go you can't go too far to either side of the spectrum. You can't just never have a plan, but then it's also like, are you going to be the guy who's like, I know exactly what my workout's going to look like for the next 6 months? I think the plan is good. Having a plan and then just knowing that you're obviously going to change it at some point, whether it be because you think differently or like a different situation comes up, like you're always going to make adjustments to the plan
I think so.
and being willing to make adjustments to the plan, probably more importantly.
I think that's like a big one is kind of planning for the adjustment. Not to say like over plan everything, but you kind of also know like when things are on the horizon, when something is going to be slightly problematic if you have any sort of progression that you've already done. You'll kind of see it on the horizon of like that's going to be my trouble week or like I know XYZ athletes based on whatever it is, whether it be an injury, something more passive, they're going to have trouble with that session. You'll already have plan Bs. If you're worth anything as a coach, in my opinion, you'll have those plan Bs. You're not going to sit there and go, "Oh my God, what do I do now? I threw something out there and it's not
Yeah.
working." Well, that's not you, buddy.
Hmm.
Take a walk, champ.
Yeah. No, I agree.
I guess like for you, how much like you kind of talked about like the communication aspect in efficacious coaching. Like how much of that is like of value to you is the communication point of what you're doing.
I mean, I think it's super important. I think regardless of where you're at, it's super important. I think I'm just like noticing it more now, especially this year. I think the relationships just look a little bit different when they're going to look different depending on like what the demographic is.
Mm-hmm.
And especially too when you may have a team with players that are you have like a wide range. People are like way different spots in their career. Like I said, like we have younger guys that are up and coming, and then we have veterans who have been in the game for a long time. So like those relationships look different, and the communication, like the way you may communicate something, and it's also too you have to a lot of times I feel like when you step into college, people are just younger in general. They'll probably have a little bit of a training background, but like they don't have like a very strong view. They don't have like training opinions like coaches have like training opinions. You're not going to really find like a freshman coming in that's like, if it's not West Side Conjugate, I'm not doing it. It's like the people,
Yeah.
guy, like unless like, if they are, man, that person needs to be a strength coach. So I think that looks a little different when people like, especially if people have, and this might be interesting too with the transfer portal. I'd be interested to see if you've experienced this, like you are at different schools or you're with different teams, and like different teams do things different ways. That that kind of like shapes your view on like what training, if like what training is, what if it's important to you as an athlete, whether you had a good experience with that staff or coach or a bad experience with that staff or coach. So I think being cognizant of that and just knowing how to like ask questions that will kind of get that person to like tell you what their view of training is, or like what they like, don't like. And it feels weird too, and it's obviously different for college versus pro versus like what sport you're dealing with. But I think it's huge. That's kind of why like the first thing that came to my mind when it talked about like effective coaching is like honest, like just being like honest with someone, um, just being straight up and kind of like letting them know where you stand, and then also finding out like kind of where they stand and finding the optimal within that, because that might look a little bit different for each person. Like if a person has had a bad experience with lifting in the past, and they go, oh, like I don't like it, cause I don't like to do this because I fucked my back up doing this. Okay, well that conversation looks a lot different from someone who's just like gung ho and like has had like a really good experience, and like they're like a gym rat. So,
Yeah.
and I don't think that's a reason. Like if someone has a bad relationship with the weight room, I don't think that's a reason to like say like, okay, they're just a lost cause. I think it's just a challenge to you have to approach that conversation a little bit differently, and I think it's an opportunity to like show them that like, hey, like that XYZ exercise isn't bad in and of itself. It's more of like, how we dose it, how we load it, this and that. Maybe there's something, maybe no one ever actually told you like how to do a squat properly, or maybe like this variation, like the way you're the way your anatomy is, like you're probably just never going to be like super good at this movement. Maybe this movement's a little bit better for you. Um, and
I think that
that's something that's like, I think that's something that I've really learned like over these like past few months, especially. It's just like that looks like I think about that a lot differently than I used to. I think.
I think especially I like in my situation where you kind of flip flop and you have a female team or a women's team, you have a men's team, and you kind of go back and forth and you look at some of the stuff. Like those conversations just happen like way differently amongst those different dynamics. And if you were to place it in another school or another team, it's a very another different dynamic. So I think like the biggest thing that you kind of mentioned that like it brings like a hyper fixate on is how much that conversation changes based off of where you're at and who you're dealing with and having that communication level. And I think it comes from a little bit more of a basic understanding of each other and wanting to learn a little bit about each other. So not just to the extent of, they're maybe they don't have a great relationship in the weight room, right? But then you as a coach is like trying to understand like what is the foundation of that relationship with the weight room or that movement, and how do you make that correction, almost like how do you course correct from there, and how do you get them to at least not hate it. It doesn't have to be that they want to become a gym rat, but now you're getting them to the point of like understanding why it's necessary. I think that's one of those big deal items that communication really serves within that purpose that we often forget about, and we don't, and we in some way shape or form like almost neglect, you know. Uh,
Hmm.
those are really important in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And that kind of like leads me to the third topic that I was thinking of is like how does how does like effective coaching change over the course of an athlete's career, and like how does the dynamic athlete coach dynamic change as like this could be like college or pro, like someone who's younger versus someone who's like older, you've been with a few years, or maybe you're just started coaching them, but they're in a lot different spot in their career. And I'd be interested about your thoughts on this with like the transfer portal now, especially. I don't know how many people are. I know like I feel like mid majors are getting kind of the bad end of that deal. Usually, it's mid major people that are transferring to those Power Four schools. But like, I mean, there's transfers every year in a lot of
Yeah.
sports. So like, have you have you seen a difference in that, and also have you seen a difference in how like think about like when the freshmen come in, the way you coach them and the relationship with them, the dynamic with them, when they come in the freshman summer versus like when they're entering their like junior or senior year. Does that change? Does it not change? I kind of have my preconceived thoughts, but I want to hear what you have to say.
I think in general that starts to release a little bit, the reins start to release a little bit as somebody gets up in the top. Obviously in football it's a little bit different. Like you'll always have a little bit of the totalitarian environment of you're going to do what I say no matter what, but then it becomes a little bit more, I don't want to say like peer to peer, but like that like kind of friend jokingness of like we have that easy session. You're not like I need to make sure you do everything because they are, and then you
Yeah,
can have
I think
conversations.
yeah, you kind of do. You have to do. I think you have to do the work up front to set
Hmm.
that up like long term. Like
Yeah.
there was a really good um the coach at Colorado Mines, Trevor Florendo. I don't know if you follow
Hmm.
him on Instagram. He's actually a really smart dude, really good follow. He had a good post. This was a while back. Talked about like how like yeah like the coaching is like very like intensive when guys first get there. He was talking about football, I think in particular, like their freshman like fall, their freshman summer, and then if you do that correctly, it's more of just like they know what to do, and obviously that's can't be like blindly applied to everything, but
There's a
I
foundation that's
think
laid that you can rely on to where when you want to relax, the system is set up to be running itself. It becomes an ecosystem.
Right. But you have to, I think, hop. I don't think you can do it the other way around. I don't think you can like do it on the back end. It has to be done on the front end. And I think the thing about it too is like the standard is always the standard. It's just when they're first starting off, you as the coach kind of have to hold their hand through that in the hopes that if, they buy in, you do things right, that they will hold themselves to that standard. I think that's kind of like, in other words, like what you were getting at, like when the time they get a little bit older, they're on their shit. And then if they're not on their shit, maybe you have to say something to them. But ideally, like they're holding themselves to that standard and holding other people to that standard too. But that work
Exactly.
has to be done up front. I think. I don't think it can be done on or at least it's a hell of a lot tougher to do it on the back end.
And it does really mess things up when, you know, I think you can really tell in the track and field too, because not only do the athletes obviously go through that progression, but they start to understand a little bit more of what your system is, what you do, how you coach. And because it is a team sport when we get to like championship season, but it's a very individual sport in a day to day process. It becomes far more of a peer to peer relationship. Like by the end of, I obviously this one was a little bit weirder of a dynamic, but we were friends because we were teammates. I graduated, became a coach, was a little bit more of a utilitarian coach with him. And then as he got postgraduate after, national champion, it became more peer to peer of what works, what doesn't. I want to try this. What do you want to do? The discussions happen with this is where I'm looking at going with your programming. How do you feel about that? Do you like what does that feel like to you? What do you like? Those typically happen where by the end of someone's probably career, they more so, if they aren't a complete asshole, they're getting elevated to that like more peer-to-peer relationship with the coach of, we are really in this together and we fine-tune like what makes each other tick and how to get the most out of this like product moving forward. So that's a big one. The transfer portal throws a wrench into that. Um, whether and that I think that's with regardless of any sport because they're coming from a completely different system and it's and everyone has this a little whether we like it or not we really do have this like heliocentrism where the world is exactly how I see it and what I was in and everything else is like that, so they'll come over and like I said, this is for every sport that I've seen and worked with. It's like inside the transfer portal, they'll come over and they're like, well, at my last school we did this. It's like, okay, but we don't do that here. Okay, but like, why not? Because we don't. That's this is our system. This is why we don't, and like, that's okay. Okay, but we used to do this. That's great. We don't now. Please get like, they. I don't want. It's not baggage, but they carry this like little bit of. Well, I liked what we did there. It's like, well, if you did, like, why are you here? You know, and there you don't have that. You almost have to carve out what was already preset. Maybe they were a freshman or a junior. It's like when you see it a lot of like someone transfers up from like sophomore to junior year. You have to take that time to like kind of carve out all this layer to then get into the foundation and expedite that relationship to like build it up quickly, and that makes it really tough. Like you'll either have a great example is like a fifth year senior where you're either going to have someone who is so refined that they're like, I really understand that like I'm going to approach a brand new system, I'm going to hop in and I'm going to get in line. We've been really lucky to have some of those. And then you have others that are like, I'm a fifth year senior and I want it to be exactly like my last school, but I'm wanting to step up. And it's like, it's not how it's going to be. Like and those are the more problematic ones because in their head they're like, I know I'm only in this for a year, I want it done my way, you're going to do what I want. It's like, well, I'm not going to change everything for one year and turn it on its head. And then you have these like battles.
Mm-hmm.
Now when it works, it works great and you've added new pieces of the puzzle and maybe learn a little bit, but when it doesn't work, it can be just a crazy dynamic.
Yeah, It's funny. Some people got like relationship baggage. Some other people got like previous strength coach baggage.
Yeah, and it's crazy, but it's like you really have that, and you don't really, when I hate to say it this way, but it's like if somebody recruits somebody and they bring them over, they don't think about that, and that's not to say like you have to consider that in there, but it's like that those are those blind spots that like you don't really see until it's apparent, and you're like, we should have
Yeah.
thought about this, and you're like, well, you don't really think about that.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense too. Like you can't. I mean, that's why people like. That's why some people like struggle so much or like change so much when they go from like high school to college. And I'm not even talking about like sports. I'm just talking about like as a student or like a person in general. It's because like your your day to day life is like so much different than it was before for most people,
Mhm.
and like you can't. It's one of those things like you can't predict that. Like like oh yeah, it's gonna be different, but like you don't really know how different it's gonna be and how it's gonna feel until you're actually in the shit. So
Exactly.
it makes sense. I think you kind of have to like you said, you hold your like standard of like okay, this is like how we do things here, but also knowing that like a good answer to like why are we doing this? I did it this differently here. Like to just say like, well, we don't do it like because I said so. We do it this way here. That's probably not a good enough answer. Maybe like
Yeah.
an immediate, but then like after the lift, like actually like explain
Then you can
yourself.
take that time and work through
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. I don't think it's I think if you're really like there for the athlete, you owe them like your thought out explanation as to like a because like you do have
I don't
if you
even
want
know if
them to
it's just
believe.
sorry, I was gonna say I don't even know if it's just the thought out explanation. I feel like you owe them the time,
Yeah, the time and like just like the the
the
sense like
appreciation for thought.
right and just like them them knowing that you have their best interest at heart, which is your job is to have their best interest at heart, not
Yeah,
just to say like okay. Yeah.
I think that's a big one, and obviously, I mean, we obviously at Elon we train so much differently than much of the industry in a sense. Not to say like we're better than you or anything. It's just like we literally just this is kind of like our methodology that we kind of train with, and it's so different that like a lot of the athletes they have no idea of the what and the why and how, and especially if you bring somebody like in the sense of like track and field, you go to Europe and almost every system is going to look so similar. Hey, they practice 3 times a week in track and field, and it'll be Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then on the off days they're going to lift. And it's like, well, that's a little counterintuitive. B, their lifts are like, hey, you're going to power clean, then you're going to squat, and then you're going to do like a couple accessories, but like you're going to hit like 6 sets of clean, you know, 6 to 8 sets of like squat, and it's going to be like partial range or whatever. Very simple lift, like kind of glued around. It's an Olympic lifting program that's like slightly modified for like track and field. They come here and they're like, that's completely different. And I'm like, yeah. So we have those conversations so often. It's like I have no problem answering that. I'll encourage the conversation, but then it becomes almost have to be like a salesman of like, here's why we're doing what we do in comparison to what you have done. And then you'll have what I really love is like when they have the breakthrough moment. Obviously, the most important thing is the training on the track, which thankfully for most of them, I get to influence as well.
Hmm.
But when they have that and they're going, aha, you can kind of go, see, it's all one big picture. And this is all going in that direction. Like the training that we're doing is working. And then it
Hmm.
becomes this like very easy thing of the next time, whether it be a transfer or an international or just a high schooler who doesn't, you know, they're fresh off of like getting their first year in the weight room. Well, now those like sophomores, juniors, seniors, they talk to and they help you with that conversation. So then that conversation, instead of you having to answer weight room questions, becomes a little bit more of like foundational like relationship building with these athletes. So it makes that easier. And then it
Hmm.
becomes a big system. The first year is
Yep.
just tough.
Yeah, I would argue that the championship trophies help with that argument as well. They definitely don't hurt.
Yeah, that does help.
Yeah. Obviously, you don't want to be like, well, because we you want to be careful of a survivorship bias, I guess, in that.
Yeah,
But you could conveniently have that conversation in your office with a backdrop of 7 championship trophies.
yeah.
Um, so
Ugh.
I guess one more question before we wrap up is like how, because Elon cross country track and field has had a ton of success over the over the recent years. How do you how do you avoid like survivorship bias and confirmation bias within training? Because I would imagine it gets tougher. When shit's going wrong, people usually think to change things. When stuff's going right, people usually say, "If it ain't broke, don't fix it." How do you balance that?
I think for me, I look at times of year and like what we did during those times, and again, like going back to the what went right for who, what did they typically do, what went wrong for who, and what did they typically do. And like last year, I got done with the year and I dissected the whole program. And what I had found is I was a little too conservative. I think a lot on like aerobic volumes. I got, you kind of keep the easy days really easy, sprint on the sprint days, the typical stuff. And then I looked towards it and I was like, I think I was just a little too conservative. Like I never really like touched over like 2,000 meters in volume, and kind of was a little bit more so like feed the cats. Not definitely like the far end of the spectrum, but like definitely like much more conservative on volumes. This year, especially in fall, I got more, I slowly built the training over the summer for them. If they did it, they could step into in fall. And then in fall, it was like if you didn't do any training, we had to like do some work to kind of get there. But it slowly worked up to like 400-meter girls were we were doing some 600s. Aerobic pace is obviously not just blowing them up, but we're going to do some 600s. And then my short sprinters, they were working up to 5 by 6 by 300, things like that. Lo and behold, aerobic capacity improved, the ability to you know repeat efforts at a maximal intent level improved, high speeds improved, mechanics improved because they had the extended upright rehearsal when we're in a fatigue state, but they had the foundational aspects of like doing the dribbles prior, so we're just drilling this over and over. All that to say, like, I worked through it and I was like, I think that was maybe some of our problems, like dying out at the end of some of our races where it just wasn't speed endurance. But I think I limited the speed endurance aspect by having not enough aerobic volume. Um, really addressed that this year. And then now I'm looking into, I also came into from fall to our like spring semester. I was like, I don't know if I addressed acceleration enough. You know, we can't do as much max V because we're outside. It's January, it's 40 degrees, which in North Carolina, everyone acts like that's like 8 degrees. I was like, so let's address acceleration and like being able to like kind of audit and be like, what do I need to do? What successes were kind of laid forward? What programs had good success? Okay, what do they like to do? And I think that's where like finding other materials on other people and not basically like grabbing it blanketly applying, but you're going like, what do they do that's different than me? Why does it work for them? And like really being like trying to diagnose like the purpose of what they did without talking to them is tough. But I think that's one of the biggest things to do. Um, and then I think that it just comes from wanting to be better. I think a good coach, no matter what, like for me, we cut it way too close in indoor. It was exciting, don't get me wrong, but like I want to have that wrapped up by the time we get to 4x4s. Like I want that to be a fun rip it race.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that comes obviously from bringing in better athletes and recruiting. But like when we program, it's like how do we prepare them to be the best? So I think like when you have someone who's like, and there's pieces on our staff that like are absolutely just nuts about this. So I think that's a good thing because then you have someone that's like driving you, and if someone's driving you to be better, you do the same thing.
Yeah. That's a good place to wrap it up. I don't think I
Thanks.
can say anything else. I don't think I can add anything else after that. That was great.
Let's rate some drinks.
Let's rate some drinks. All right, the Alani Cherry Twist. Like I said, cherry limeade is kind of like it puts the floor a little bit higher. It's definitely, like I said, it's not as good as the Ghost Cherry Limeade. It's not as good as the Rain Cherry Limeade. I'm trying to think who else has done a cherry limeade that I've tried. It's not bad, but it's definitely not like a top tier cherry limeade flavor. The formula, we know like Alani's formula is pretty basic, just kind of similar to yours. It's 200 mgs of caffeine, B vitamins, except for it's way more expensive, and it is, I mean, it is way more expensive, and they use predatory marketing. So overall, it's not a bad flavor. Like I said, like my favorite flavor, if I did have a favorite flavor of the Ani, is going to be like the Orange Dream. I think that actually tastes pretty solid. But if it did help, obviously, these are free in the clubhouse. I'm not picking this up unless I'm in like a pinch at a gas station. I'd rather crack like an OG White Monster with less caffeine, just
And
to get
enjoy
like a
it.
better, yeah, and enjoy it so much more. Um, but it's not a bad flavor. So I'm gonna have to go. All things considered, I'm gonna give it like a 6.1. Give it like a 6.1 for Alani. Not bad, but overall, definitely I would say below
Could
average.
be so much worse.
Yeah, could be so much worse.
The Kirkland signature can, it's not very amazing. I'll
Not
be honest
nah,
with you.
pretty
It look
bland.
it is off brand can type of like branding. You know, it's very like energy drink, not the Kirkland signature kind of deal. 200 milligrams of caffeine, 7 essential vitamins, which is mostly B vitamins, zero sugar. Can's not, like I said, can's not great. Where this thing strives is price. 70 cents a can. You cannot beat that. The only thing that is remotely close is 3D, in my opinion, with 200 milligrams, and it's like $1.49 per can if you do like a 12 pack. Um, Now that's a name brand versus like a Costco brand. Tastes pretty good, to be honest. Um, I would probably go like with the tropical flavor. I don't know about the peach and the orange, but with tropical, I'm gonna go 7.1.
Wow, really solid.
It's a very solid one, and I'm gonna say it's 7.1 because of our economy.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's a 7.1 for a different reason than another
Yeah,
drink maybe.
I
It
think if
crept up
it's
on the. It did really well on the price.
yeah,
It got hurt by the can aesthetic. The flavor kind of brought some middle ground. The
and like the
ingredients
ingredients is very simple. It's
very
cut and
stock.
dry. It's
It's
energy.
a stock formula. Yep.
Yeah, stock formula, but you it's so hard to beat a 70 cents per serving. That's so
Yeah.
hard to beat.
Mm.
Especially like you go out there and some of these cans are, $3.99.
Yeah, it's insane. Dude, I think I went to a vitamin shop. I saw the bucked up energy. It was like $5 a can. It's
Yeah,
crazy. It's
I'm
like
not paying for that.
$50 for a 12 pack. Get out of here.
Get out of my face. I'm going to
Yeah.
Costco.
Yeah. Honestly, dude. And well, that about wraps it up for today, folks. As always, appreciate you guys tuning in. Bedboys.com. Get you some merch. Got some new designs on the website. Bedboys.tv. Follow us on Instagram. Past, future, present episodes, clips, our personal Instagrams are always associated with those posts if you want to check out some training content. And as always, we'll see you next time. Peace.